If you are to the point where you're considering either the Harbor Freight or the Craftsman 10-inch single bevel sliding miter saw for your shop, I think you're going to find this video useful. This is an in-depth feature-by-feature comparison of the Harbor Freight Chicago Electric 61972 and the Craftsman 407530. Let's take a look at the specifications for the Harbor Freight Chicago Electric saw. This one happens to be model number 61972, and I've seen this offered a number of different ways. I happened to acquire this one without a blade. It was being sold without a blade. Sometimes you'll see it with a blade, sometimes you'll see it without a blade on the Harbor Freight website. So this is a 10-inch, 15 amp single bevel sliding miter saw. It runs out at about 5,000 RPM. The cut is 2 3/4 by 12 inches. However, I have cut 4x4s up against a fence. There is no laser on this saw. Warranty is about 90 days, and the price at the time of this recording is $109.99. Let's take a look at the specifications for the Craftsman model number 407530. The motor runs out at about 4,800 RPMs with no load. The blade is a 10-inch, 60-tooth Craftsman carbide blade. It weighs in at 45 pounds. The miter will do 50 degrees left and 50 degrees right. Cross-cut maximum height is 3.5 inches by 11.5 inches. Cross-cut maximum width is 2.5 inches by 12.5 inches. Miter 45 degrees right and left is 3.5 inches by 8 inches maximum cut. Bevel left is 1 3/4 inches by 11.5 inches. 45 degree miter and 45 degree bevel left is 1 3/4 inches by 8 inches. Crown molding nested maximum is 5 3/4 inches. Base molding against the fence is 3.5 inches. It does come with dust control, does have a motor brake, does come with a wrench and a clamp, does have a laser that we'll look at later on, doesn't come with a stand, does have a 1-year warranty, and at the time of this video it was $229. Let's take a look at the right hand side of the Harbor Freight miter saw. Here you have a simple trigger mechanism which is easy to operate. No safety mechanism here. Does have a handle in order to pick it up, but because of the weight distribution of this saw, you're going to have to put one hand here and another hand somewhere on the back to lift it up. Otherwise, it's just going to be too heavy on that side. The yellow knob down there is to control whether this goes back and forth or not. Excellent for storage. When it comes to tilting this up, all you do is lift and turn that. It brings it up so it's operational. When you want to store, just take this, twist it, put it back into place. Now you're locked into place. You also have a dust control bag here. However, with this unit, I found the dust control really is not that good. It will collect some, but not very much. You do have the depth control knob here, which is on the other side. I'll show you that in a few minutes. You also have some extensions, which are controlled by this. I'm going to go more into the extensions later on. And of course, you do have another place from not only this side, but the other side for your clamping mechanism. And then you do have 4 holes all the way around for bolting it down onto a table or a bench, which I strongly recommend that you do. They're also, I'm going to call them like rubber grommets, almost acting like feet, would kind of insulate it against, maybe just a little bit against the vibration. So that's the right-hand side of the Harbor Freight miter saw. Let's take a look at the right-hand side of the Craftsman. You have the on-off switch here for the laser, power control for the saw itself, onboard storage for your wrench. You do have onboard storage for your power cord as well. You do have a nice handle back here that is very well centered and balanced, so if you want to lift it by one hand, you can. And of course, you do have dust control right here. This is your height control. I'm going to show you a little bit more about that a little bit later on. And then this is the control for locking the saw down for storage. All you have to do is pull that out. Then this lifts up for normal use. When you're ready to store, push that down and then push this back into place. Also, this has got some good extensions. I'm going to show you more about the extensions in just a moment. Let's take a look at the depth control for the Craftsman. And I do want to point out first, I've taken this power cord and put it on the other side of this bolt, this adjustment screw, so that you can see this better. Normally it should be on the other side. So this little lever right here, it's dark colored so it's hard to see. So I'll pull it down like this, okay? And all you have to do is pull it down to this point and then bring this down, and you can see how that is your depth control right there. So just by turning this knob one way or the other, that controls your depth of cut for the Craftsman. Let's take a look at the left-hand side of the Harbor Freight miter saw. Standard blade guard. This one happens to be transparent. Simple blade guard control. Dust bag again. You do have this control for depth control. That's controlled by twisting this up or down and then popping this lever in and out will either engage or disengage this. Back here again is the stop for this. Bevel control back here, which I'm going to cover in depth a little bit later on in this video. Also, you do have a little clamp here, a very simple one, as well as a way to tie it down with this. And again, we've got the extensions on both sides and the way to tighten those down and hold them in place. And again, I'm going to talk more about the extensions later on in this video. Let's take a look at the left-hand side of the Craftsman. This knob controls the tension on the bar to keep the saw from sliding back and forth, either while you're moving it or storing it. Of course, blade guard, simple control mechanism on the blade guard. Right there is your controls for your laser, which I'm going to show you a little bit later on. Does come with a clamp that can be put on either the left or right hand side. This fence can be moved out so you can do your bevel cuts, and of course, just as on the other side, you do have an extension right here. So that's the left hand side of the Craftsman. Let's take a closer look at the extension arms on the Harbor Freight miter saw. As you can see here, the extension arm adds about 5 1/4, maybe 5 3/8 to either side of the miter saw table. But one of the things you'll notice here is it is not flush or even with the table, and that's a problem on both sides. So if you're concerned about supporting your workpiece correctly so it doesn't sag and then splinter at the last part of your cut, you're going to need something in addition to the extension arms to support your workpiece. The Craftsman has extension arms on both the left and right hand side. In order to unlock them, all you have to do is pull up this lever, slide this out to the position that you want, lock it down into place. If you know you're going to be doing multiple cuts of the same length, all you have to do is bring this into position, measure from the blade to this little stop right here, get the position that you want, lock it down, then you can put your workpiece in here, bring it up flush to this little stop, and make multiple cuts over and over again without having to remeasure. Okay? Then when you're done, unlock, flip this down, slide it back in, lock it into place. So that's the extension arm system on the Craftsman. Anytime you have extension arms for a miter saw, you want to make sure that they're level or flush with the main table of the miter saw. I've just taken one of my clamps that I know is true and square, and I placed it across the table, and both the left and the right hand side extensions are perfectly level or flush with the table on the Craftsman. Let's take a look at the footprint for the Harbor Freight miter saw. The extensions on the left and on the right hand side do not retract, so you literally have to remove them if you're going to start without them. If you leave those on like I do, you're right at, 27 inches. That's with the extensions on. If you take them off, it's about 17 or 18 inches. Front to back, this ends up being just about 28 inches from the front to the back. With the arm up, you're looking at just about 22 inches, and it's a little over 15 inches when it's put down in place. So that's the footprint on the Harbor Freight miter saw. Whether you're looking at storage or a transportation, the footprint of a power tool is something you always need to take into consideration. and that's no exception with the Craftsman, so let's take a look. With the extension arms all the way out on both sides, you're looking at just under 40 inches. If we place them back in against the body or the housing, you're looking at about 22 to 23.5 inches. The front to back on this saw is just about 30.5 inches. If the saw is in the upright position, the handle peaks out at about 23.5 inches. With it in the down position, the handle is only 15 inches off the table, but you're going to have to take the dust bag off if you're trying to keep that same height, because with the dust bag in place, you're looking at somewhere around 22 inches, as I recall. This also has a very unique support system or travel system. You notice you have two different tubes at two different heights. There's the front one, or the upper, and then there's the lower one. And they've done this in an attempt to reduce the extension out the back. So again, front to back, this is right at 30.5 inches. So that's the footprint on the Craftsman miter saw. Let's take a look at some of the factory alignments on the Harbor Freight. Vertical alignment was just fine directly from the factory. When I checked it on 45, it was off considerably, and I'll show you a little bit more about how I adjusted that later on in this video. The miter gauge on the Harbor Freight came from the factory aligned perfectly, as you can see there with my square. Both at 90 degrees and 45 degrees, it was spot on. Now I want to show you why you should always check your alignment even though it's coming directly from the factory. So I've got my little square up against the back fence, and as I bring the blade down, you notice I've got clearance in the back. It's got plenty of clearance. But if I bring it all the way out to the full distance here, then the blade actually touches my square. All right? So the next thing we want to look at is, compared to the miter, is it going straight? So if I bring it down here, I can run it all the way back and it looks like it's pretty straight. So without doing much more investigation, I believe that this fence, and I also did this on the other side, this fence and this fence are not square or perpendicular to this slot right here. Also, you'll notice from the factory, this blade is right up against this red plate right here, and it can't be adjusted any further. Maybe a fraction of an inch somewhere, okay? So it's significantly off-center to this slot. So always check the alignment from the factory on any power tool that you get that needs alignment. Blade alignment for the Craftsman is pretty good from the factory. At 90 degrees, it's almost dead on, and the same thing at 45 degrees. So from the factory, the Craftsman blade alignment to the table is pretty good. Let's take a closer look at the miter gauge and control on the Harbor Freight. So as you can see here, those are all the increments. They run all the way around. And then there's the indents. Underneath the sliding portion, you do have this little bolt here that's adjustable. So if your workspace is not perfectly level and you want to keep this from wobbling, and maybe for some reason you haven't bolted it down, this will help you to keep it a little bit more stable. When you want to move it, just like any other miter saw, all you have to do is turn this counterclockwise and hold this, depress this little tab down and move it into the position that you're looking for, and let it up, and it'll pop into one of those indents that you see right there. Let's take a look at the miter system on the Craftsman. Of course, there's the little gauge right there, and the little indicator which can be adjusted. This is your detent bypass, that little red button right there. And then of course there's your lever for lifting up and bypassing detents individually. And you've got a little lever on this side that locks it into place when you press it down. And there is the miter scale on the right hand side. And I want to show you something else about this, so I'm going to switch this shot around. One thing I wanted to point out to you, from the factory, if you can see that little raised area or bubbled area at the back of 31.6, this came from the factory this way. and then you can see more bubbling back here. So it looks like this is some kind of metallic tape or thin metal with a piece of adhesive or some form of adhesive holding it down to the table, but I wanted to point that out to you. Let's take a look at the miter mechanism on the Craftsman. So like many others, there's a little lever right here, so all you have to do is lift this up and then slide it to the position that you want it. If it's not at a detent, a standard position, all you have to do is lock it down with this lever that I showed you earlier on the right hand side. If you're close to a detent, all you have to do is move it back and you hear it pop into place. Even though you're going into a detent, you always want to make sure you lock it down. So I'm going to take the lock off. If I lift up on this lever here and press in and then let go, now all the detents can be bypassed and I don't have to hold it with my thumb. This mechanism is perhaps a little bit stiffer than I've seen with some of the others. When you want to release this, all you have to do is pull up on this and let go. It'll pop out. So there it is locked. Lift up on this little lever here and it is unlocked. So that is the miter mechanism on the Craftsman. The bevel control on the Harbor Freight is very similar to others. All you have to do is loosen this little yellow handle and then begin tilting it over, get it to the position that you want it, and then tighten down the yellow handle. And this will go all the way over to 45 degrees. Now, I found from the factory mine was off, so in order to change or adjust any of the settings here of the bevel, you have to adjust these two set screws, and then if there's a significant difference, then you also want to change this little guy here. Loosen that little nut or that little screw, and then go ahead and change this up a little bit. But that's what I had to do for this saw because it coming from the factory, the 45 degrees was way, way off. Let's take a look at the bevel control on the Craftsman. This lever right here controls the locking mechanism. As you can see on this left-hand side, there's a little bolt that you can use to set or adjust. This prevents it from going past full 90 degrees. You have a little indicator here which is a little bit adjustable. In order to get to a full 45 degrees, you have to pull out on this little red button, the position that I have it in there. And then when you have it pressed back in, it doesn't let you go quite as far. In the 45 degree mark, I did test it with my speed square, and it did come out really close to 45 degrees. So that's it for the bevel control for the Craftsman. As I mentioned earlier, this miter saw does not come with a laser. I have seen saws that look almost exactly like this one from Harbor Freight with a laser, but this one does not come with a laser. Let's take a look at the laser for the Craftsman. I pulled it all the way out to the 12-inch cut, and as you can see, there's the laser. It's just to the left of the blade, and it's staying pretty square and pretty true to the blade all the way back. Even though I've got pretty bright lighting in here, I can see this easily. I don't know if it shows up too well with the camera, but it seems to be a pretty decent laser. I'll show you the controls on this in just a moment. The controls for the laser on the Craftsman are at the very top of the blade. This little dial on top controls how far the laser beam is or the line is from the blade, and this little dial controls whether it's square or not to the blade. Took me a minute or two to get it lined up from the factory, but otherwise a very simple, easy to use mechanism for the laser for the Craftsman. Let's take a look at the noise level for the Harbor Freight miter. So that's right there at 105. And if you look at this chart, that's down into the red. So anytime you're using this miter saw or any other, make sure you have hearing protection for yourself and those that are working with you. Let's take a look at the noise levels on the Craftsman. Now you notice this does have a brake on it, but as you can see right there, it comes in right at about, let me see, there you go, right at about 100 decibels. And if you look at this chart right here, 100 decibels is right there. So always make certain that you have good hearing protection as well as eye protection anytime you're using this power tool or any other loud power tool. I hope I've been able to provide you with enough insight into the specifications and features of these two miter saws to help you to identify the one that best meets your requirements as well as your budget. I've uploaded a number of other table saw, miter saw, and drill press comparison videos and have placed their links in the description below. If you found this video of value, please press like. If you're not already a subscriber, I would love to have you as a subscriber. And as always, good luck on your projects. Let's take a look at the miter control on the Harbor Freight. No, that's bevel control. Bevel control. Let's take a look at the right-hand side of the Craftsman. No, this is the left-hand side. Left, right, left, right. Let's take a look at the right-hand side of the, this is a Chicago, Harbor Freight Chicago Electric. Anytime you're using extensions on your table saw, you want to make, no, it's a miter saw. Miter saw, not table saw. Miter saw.